The Arctic research vessel Polaris cut through the midnight blue waters, its hull creaking against the occasional ice floe. Dr. Morgan Hayes watched the sonar display with growing confusion. Something massive was rising from the depths, something that didn't match any known marine species pattern. "Captain Donovan, you need to see this," Morgan called, brushing his dark hair from his eyes. At 35, he'd spent nearly a decade studying marine ecosystems, but nothing in his experience prepared him for what they were tracking. "That's no whale," Donovan muttered, squinting at the readout. "Whatever it is, it's moving with purpose." The crew gathered as something breached the surface 200 meters off their starboard side, a sleek, opalescent craft that seemed to shimmer between solid and liquid states. No flags, no markings, nothing to indicate its origin. "Military," someone whispered. Morgan shook his head. "No nation has tech like that." The ship's communication system crackled unexpectedly. "Vessel designation Polaris," came a melodic, slightly distorted voice. "Permission to approach and establish contact." Captain Donovan looked to Morgan, who nodded cautiously. "Permission granted," the captain replied. What happened next would redefine Morgan's understanding of life itself. A panel on the strange craft dissolved into light, and a figure emerged. Humanoid, but unmistakably not human. Tall and lithe, with skin that shifted between deep azure and violet depending on how the light hit it. Large, almond-shaped eyes dominated a face with subtle gill-like structures where ears would be on a human. When the being boarded their vessel, Morgan noticed the thin membrane between its elongated fingers and the graceful way it moved, as though perpetually underwater. "I am Alara. She announced through a device at her throat. Oceanographic researcher from Aquarius Proxima. The silence that followed was absolute until Morgan, driven by scientific curiosity rather than protocol, stepped forward. "Dr. Morgan Hayes, marine biologist. Earth." He extended his hand without thinking. Alara regarded it curiously before mimicking the gesture. When their hands touched, Morgan felt a slight electrical tingle, not unpleasant, but unexpected. "Your oceans are dying," she stated simply. "I was sent to understand why." The crew exchanged glances. Morgan found himself smiling despite the gravity of her words. "Usually we have to fill out grant applications for research funding. Never thought we'd have to compete with researchers from another planet." His attempt at humor fell flat as Alara cocked her head, confused. "Competition is inefficient. Collaboration improves data collection by approximately 78.3%. It was a joke," Morgan explained, feeling oddly embarrassed. "Sometimes humans use humor to ease tension in unexpected situations." "Oh." Alara's eyes, iridescent and pupilless, studied him intently. "Like when your species uses mating rituals disguised as casual interactions." The crew's awkward laughter filled the bridge, but Morgan felt heat rising to his face. Something about her directness was both disarming and strangely attractive. "That's not exactly what I meant," he managed. To everyone's surprise, Alara's lips curved upward in what appeared to be a smile. "That was my attempt at your humor. Did I succeed?" Captain Donovan cleared his throat. "Dr. Hayes, perhaps you could show our guest to the lab and explain our research?" As Morgan led Alara through the narrow corridors, he couldn't help noticing how the lights played across her skin, creating patterns like sunlight filtering through deep water. When they reached the lab, she moved immediately to the samples, her movements fluid and purposeful. "Your oceans contain 47% fewer microorganisms than our last survey," she observed, examining a slide without using any equipment. "Last survey?" Morgan asked, suddenly realizing the implications. "You've been here before?" Alara turned those mesmerizing eyes toward him. "Many times, over many of your centuries. This is the first time we've revealed ourselves." She paused, studying his reaction. The situation has become too critical for observation alone. Morgan felt a strange mix of scientific excitement and personal fascination. Whatever was happening would change everything. His research, his understanding of life, perhaps his very future. "Well," he said finally, extending his hand again, this time deliberately. "Welcome to Earth, Alara. I have a feeling this is the beginning of a very interesting partnership." Her fingers intertwined with his, that subtle electrical current flowing between them again. "Partnership," she repeated, as though tasting the word. "Yes, I believe I would like that very much." Morgan Hayes of Earth. 3 weeks had passed since Alara's arrival on the Polaris, and Morgan found himself increasingly drawn to her presence. The research team had settled into an uneasy acceptance of their alien visitor, but Morgan alone seemed genuinely comfortable around her. Your species relies heavily on verbal communication, Alara observed one evening as they worked late in the lab. It seems inefficient. Morgan looked up from his microscope. As opposed to? On Aquarius Proxima, we communicate primarily through bioelectric fields and chromatic shifts. She demonstrated by allowing ripples of blue-green light to cascade across her skin. More direct, less room for misinterpretation. That sounds. Morgan searched for the right word, intimate. Alara's skin briefly flashed a deep rose color before settling back to its usual azure. Yes, perhaps that is why we seldom lie to one another. Their work required them to venture into the frigid Arctic waters the next day. Morgan watched in awe as Alara moved through the ocean with preternatural grace, her body seeming to become one with the current. Without the bulky diving equipment he required, she could dive deeper, stay longer, move faster. "You're beautiful down there," he told her afterward, the words escaping before he could consider them. "I mean, the way you move. It's like watching a dance." "Your movements are also fascinating," she replied, reaching out to touch his face with curious fingers. "So constrained by your biology, yet you adapt. I find it admirable." The touch lingered longer than necessary. Neither pulled away. Their routine developed smoothly. Days spent collecting samples, evenings analyzing data, and nights talking about their vastly different worlds. Morgan taught her about human customs. Alara shared glimpses of her civilization that existed primarily beneath the surfaces of distant oceans. The breakthrough came during a particularly dangerous dive. Morgan's oxygen line became entangled in a submerged ice formation. As panic began to set in, Alara appeared before him, her eyes glowing with reassurance. Without communication equipment, they should have been unable to coordinate. Yet somehow, as she placed her hands on either side of his helmet, Morgan understood exactly what she needed him to do. Their movements synchronized perfectly as they freed the line together. Later, safe aboard the ship, Morgan couldn't explain how he'd known. "It was like I could hear your thoughts," he said, still shivering despite the thermal blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Alara's expression was thoughtful. "Perhaps you did, in a way. My species can project basic emotional states and intentions when in close physical contact with compatible nervous systems." "Compatible?" Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Yes." She hesitated. "It is unusual. I have never achieved such clarity with a non-Aquarian before." That night, as the ship's lights dimmed for the evening cycle, Morgan found Alara on the observation deck, staring at the stars. "Do you miss your home?" he asked softly. "I am beginning to wonder where home truly is," she replied, turning to face him. In the dim light, her skin glowed with subtle patterns that seemed to reach toward him. "Morgan, I would like to try something, if you are willing." She extended her hand, palm up. Understanding the invitation, Morgan placed his hand in hers. The familiar electrical tingle intensified as Alara guided his palm to rest against the side of her neck, where her gill-like structures fluttered slightly. Suddenly, Morgan felt a rush of sensations not his own: wonder, curiosity, and something deeper, warmer. Emotions without words flowed between them. "This is how we truly communicate," Alara whispered. Morgan realized he was holding his breath. When he exhaled, it came out shaky with emotion. "What are we saying to each other right now?" Her free hand came up to mirror his, resting gently against his neck. "Something that transcends our different worlds, I think." Under the Arctic stars, human and alien stood connected by touch, and something far more profound, their silent communication saying everything words could not. The research vessel docked at a small Norwegian port for resupply and shore leave. For Alara, it would be her first time on solid land since arriving on Earth. Morgan watched her nervous anticipation with endearment as they prepared to disembark. "The gravity will feel stronger," he warned her. "And the air drier." "I have made adjustments to my physiology," she replied, her skin rippling with patterns that Morgan had learned indicated excited nervousness. "But I would appreciate your support." The word carried weight beyond its surface meaning. Since their connection on the observation deck, something had shifted between them, boundaries blurring, conversations deepening. As they stepped onto the dock, Alara swayed slightly. Morgan instinctively slipped an arm around her waist to steady her. The contact sent a pleasant shock through both of them, her skin briefly illuminating where they touched. "Sorry," Morgan whispered, though he didn't move his arm. "Don't be," she answered, leaning into him. Your touch grounds me. They wandered through the small coastal town, drawing curious glances. The official story that Alara was a researcher from a remote island nation with a rare genetic condition satisfied most casual observers, though it didn't explain the occasional shimmer that passed through her skin when emotions ran high. Morgan rented a cabin on the outskirts of town, overlooking the sea. As night fell, the northern lights began their ethereal dance across the sky. We have something similar on my world, Alara said softly as they stood on the cabin's porch. Though our lights reach down into the depths of our oceans. I wish I could see it, Morgan replied. She turned to him, her expression serious. You could, if you came with me when my mission ends. The possibility hung between them, tantalizing, frightening, impossible. How would I breathe? How would I survive? He asked, though these weren't his real questions. There are ways. Her hand found his in the darkness. But first, I want to understand what this is between us. She led him inside, where moonlight and aurora light spilled through the windows. With deliberate movements, she began to unfasten the adaptive clothing she'd been provided. On my world, she explained, her voice low and musical, intimacy begins with complete honesty. No barriers. Morgan's heart hammered in his chest as her garments fell away, revealing skin that glowed with patterns that seemed to reach for him. Patterns he somehow recognized as desire, curiosity, and something like affection. May I? He asked, reaching toward her with trembling fingers. Her answering smile was permission enough. When his fingertips made contact with her bare shoulder, the electrical connection between them intensified tenfold. Morgan gasped as sensations flooded through him. Not just physical pleasure but emotions, memories, glimpses of an alien consciousness that somehow felt familiar. This is how my people join, Alara whispered, her hands now working at his clothing. Mind to mind, energy to energy. Their kiss, when it came, sent cascades of light rippling across her skin. Morgan felt as though he was drowning and breathing perfectly at once. What followed was unlike anything in human experience, a melding of physical and psychic intimacy, their bodies moving together while their minds touched in ways Morgan had never imagined possible. Alara's skin shifted with brilliant patterns that responded to his touch, while Morgan found himself capable of sensing her pleasure directly, as if it were his own. Under the dance of northern lights, human and alien discovered each other fully. Differences celebrated rather than overcome, unique anatomies explored with wonder rather than hesitation. Afterward, lying intertwined, Morgan struggled to find words for what they'd shared. That was the beginning, Alara finished for him, her skin still glowing softly where their bodies touched. On my world, once such a bond forms, it rarely breaks. Morgan traced the luminescent patterns on her arm. And on my world, we have a word for that kind of bond. Her eyes, those beautiful, inhuman eyes, met his questioningly. Love, he said simply. I think I'm falling in love with you, Alara. Her skin pulsed with a warm golden light that needed no translation. The transmission came without warning, interrupting their shared bliss. Alara's communication device activated automatically, projecting a holographic message in her native language, a series of pulsing lights and shifting colors that Morgan couldn't comprehend but Alara clearly could. Her skin went pale, almost transparent, as she absorbed the message. What is it? Morgan asked, dread pooling in his stomach. My people are coming, she said, her voice unnaturally flat. In 7 of your days. They've completed their assessment of Earth's oceans. I am to be extracted and brought home to share my findings directly. Morgan felt as though the floor had dropped away beneath him. 7 days? That's all. It was always temporary, she whispered, though her skin betrayed her with patterns of distress that contradicted her words. My mission, What about us? Morgan interrupted, reaching for her hand. What we discovered together. Does that mean nothing? Before she could answer, Morgan's phone rang, Captain Donovan, with news that government officials had arrived at the Polaris, asking pointed questions about their foreign researcher. Word had gotten out. They know, Morgan said grimly. Someone talked. They returned to the ship to find men in dark suits waiting. What followed was a flurry of diplomatic doublespeak and thinly veiled threats. The officials spoke of national security and unprecedented scientific opportunity, but their eyes never left Alara, studying her like a specimen. Dr. Hayes, the lead agent, Director Blackwood, pulled Morgan aside. Your country needs you to convince your friend to share her technology, particularly her spacecraft's propulsion system. She's a scientist, not a military asset, Morgan argued. Everything involving first contact is a matter of national security, Blackwood replied coldly. Cooperation would be appreciated, but is not strictly necessary. The threat hung in the air. Morgan sought out Alara, finding her in the lab where they'd first begun working together. They want your technology, he warned. I don't think they'll let you leave peacefully. Alara's expression was torn. My mission was observation only. Sharing advanced technology with developing worlds is forbidden by my people. And what about sharing your heart? Morgan asked quietly. Is that forbidden too? Her skin rippled with conflicting emotions. What happened between us was unexpected. Beautiful. But my first duty is to your people. I understand. Morgan turned away, hiding his pain. Just as mine should be to humanity. That night, separated by guards posted outside Alara's newly designated quarters, Morgan made his choice. Security footage would later show him accessing restricted areas, downloading research data, and disabling certain monitoring systems. Come morning, Director Blackwood stormed into Morgan's cabin. Your alien friend has escaped, and somehow her craft's security protocols were disabled. Care to explain, Doctor? Morgan met his gaze steadily. I'm a scientist. My loyalty is to knowledge, not politics. She left something for you, Blackwood said, tossing a small, glowing object onto Morgan's bed. Some kind of recording device. Consider your career over, Hayes. Alone, Morgan activated the device. Alara's image appeared, her skin showing patterns he now recognized as deep sorrow mixed with affection. Morgan of Earth, her projection said. I cannot leave without completing what we began. Meet me where the ice meets the sky at midnight. If you come, understand it may mean never returning to your world. If you don't, know that what we shared has forever changed how I understand connection. The recording ended, leaving Morgan with the most important decision of his life, and only hours to make it. The snowmobile's engine growled as Morgan pushed it to its limits across the frozen landscape. The coordinates from Alara's message led to a remote glacier outcropping, far from the research station and the government agents now swarming it. Arctic wind bit at his exposed skin, but Morgan barely noticed. His mind raced with the implications of his choice. He'd packed light, research journals, personal mementos, and the combined data from their studies. Everything else he'd left behind. The midnight sun cast an ethereal glow across the ice as he reached the designated coordinates. At first, he saw nothing. Then, like a mirage taking solid form, Alara's craft shimmered into visibility. She stood waiting, her skin shifting between colors in rapid succession, anxiety, hope, relief, joy. You came, she said simply, her voice catching. Did you doubt I would? Morgan asked, stepping closer. Your ties to your world are strong. Your career, your species. Her fingers, those beautifully elongated digits with their subtle webbing, reached for his face. Choosing me means leaving everything. Morgan leaned into her touch. Not everything, just the familiar. Their reunion kiss sent ripples of light cascading across her skin, bright enough to illuminate the ice around them. When they separated, Morgan noticed movement behind her, another figure emerging from the craft. This being resembled Alara but appeared older, with deeper coloration and more pronounced gill structures. Its skin displayed patterns of cautious assessment. This is Elder Nix, Alara explained. My mentor. I informed my people about us. Morgan straightened, suddenly aware he was facing not just another alien, but potentially a representative of their governance. Your bonding is unprecedented, Nix stated, voice harmonizing in multiple tones simultaneously. It threatens our non-interference directives. With respect, Morgan began, finding courage he didn't know he had. Love has never respected directives on any world. A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through Nix's skin. Indeed. Which is why I proposed an alternative. Alara's eyes widened in surprise. An alternative? You didn't mention. The Council has approved a modified mission, Nix continued. Earth's oceans require more than observation now. They require intervention, ecological guidance to prevent collapse. Such a mission would benefit from expertise on both sides. Morgan understood immediately. A joint mission, here on Earth. A test case, Nix acknowledged. For more open relations between our worlds. Alara's skin glowed with vibrant patterns of joy and disbelief. We could stay? Together. With conditions, Nix cautioned. Limited technology sharing. Focused on ecological restoration only. And you, addressing Morgan directly, would serve as liaison to your governments. The sound of distant helicopters reminded them of the complications ahead. Earth's authorities would not easily accept this arrangement. It won't be simple, Morgan warned Alara. There will be fear, resistance. Anything meaningful rarely is simple, she replied, her hand finding his. But we've already proven that connection can exist across worlds. Morgan turned to Nyx. What do you need from me to make this work? What followed would later be recorded in history as the Bergen Protocol, the first official contact between humanity and the Aquarians. Morgan's role as mediator earned him both criticism and acclaim from his fellow humans, but he found peace in the knowledge that their work was healing Earth's dying oceans. The intimate bond between Morgan and Alara became something more than either species had words for, not quite human love, not quite Aquarian joining, but something new that existed in the space between stars and worlds. Years later, as they stood together watching the first coral reefs regenerated through their combined technologies flourish with life, Alara's skin glowed with the pattern Morgan had come to recognize as her expression of deepest contentment. Do you ever regret your choice? She asked, her fingers intertwined with his. Morgan smiled, watching the sunset reflect off her iridescent skin. How could I regret choosing a love that saved two worlds? Above them, visible now even in daylight, a new star shone brightly, the first permanent Aquarian embassy in Earth orbit, a beacon of what was possible when hearts found each other across the vast distances between worlds.